Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Comprehension Strategies. My name is Cynthia. Happy to see you in the audience today. I'm going to quickly share my screen, share my slides. Today's presentation is brought to you by Iris Reading, a company based out of Chicago. So I'm very happy once again to see you in the audience. If you have any questions, please feel free to share your questions in the comment section. As we said, this is live. This is happening right now. This isn't pre-recorded. So if you do have any questions, you are more than welcome to direct them to me via the chat. Okay, today, as we mentioned, we are talking about comprehension strategies. So if you're having a hard time with a specific subject, you're not sure how to approach it, you're not sure what questions you should be asking, anything like that, we hope that this workshop is something you find of benefit. Again, I encourage you to check out our website, irisreading.com. We are actually known for our speed reading workshop. That is the #1 bestseller here at Iris Reading, is that speed reading workshop. We've taught that in over 100 cities around the world. So we're very, very happy with that content. We're very proud of it. If you are looking to be a little bit more of a productive reader, then I recommend you check that workshop out. It is taught by our founder and CEO, Paul Novak, who started again Iris Reading, and it's really a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I highly recommend. I wish I had taken that class back in high school, because I think it would have helped me a lot over time. Of course, better late than never, but it's just a wonderful presentation, so highly recommend it. For today's presentation, however, we are going to need to access a Dropbox link. So if you're able to pop up this link in a separate tab in your browser, irisreading.com/comp. Okay, I will share some of these articles on my screen. You're more than welcome to read them off of my screen. However, I am worried that they may be a little pixelated. So if that is the case, again, just pop it up in a separate tab in your browser, irisreading.com/comp. Now, as we said, one more time, my name is Cynthia, and thank you for stopping by. We are also on social media. So if you do enjoy the content, if you do enjoy today's presentation, please check us out on social media, whether that be on our TikTok, our Instagram, or our Facebook. The subject of the day on our Facebook group was about this thread I found this morning of a girl who claims to have forged her high school transcripts, and she claims that she made it into a prestigious university with a full scholarship. And while the comments on the thread all point towards this is not true, this is a fictional scenario, I actually think that it is possible to be done. And so if you want to follow the conversation, you want to drop your 2 cents in there, go ahead and check us out at that book club. Again, it's irisreading.com/book lovers. On our Instagram, the founder and CEO just went to the Last Bookstore, which is in LA. Tremendous, beautiful bookstore with all these not book sculptures, but you just have to go see it. It looks like a book museum. Everything is made out of books. It's stunning. And so he was able to pop in there on a trip after teaching a workshop in LA. So if you want to follow us, again, see what we're doing, see where we're going. We are trying to make reading and learning enjoyable. We're trying to make it fun again. We're trying to make it something that people actually want to do. If you're a student and you approach reading and learning and you're just discouraged, annoyed, not interested, right? All of that, then follow us. We want to change that. We think it's very important to approach reading and learning with a positive disposition, and we're going to try to find some light in those scenarios where you're just all right. If you have heard of us in the past, I am curious. So if you want to drop in the chat section right here next to the video, have you heard of iris reading in the past? Have you ever taken a workshop with us in the past? Let us know. As we said, we have hit 100 cities. That doesn't mean that we are happy with just that. We are obviously looking to go beyond the 100 cities. So if you are joining us and you've never heard of us, we do offer these workshops live in person. Now, post-pandemic, we have been able to travel some of the US, but of course we are just looking to find new locations to broadcast these workshops. So again, if you've never heard of us, welcome. If you have, welcome back. Today, as we said, we are talking about comprehension strategies. So we're talking more along the lines of asking questions, and specifically when you don't know what you should be asking. Okay, maybe it's a subject that you're just like it's not making sense, you don't get it, and that's okay, right? For example, a little bit about myself. I graduated with a BSN in nursing. My first semester of nursing school was a nightmare. I almost flunked out. It was really, really bad. And so one of the challenges that I encountered was that I would try to memorize this information without really understanding it. Okay, I was just more concerned with passing the exam and less on actually understanding the material, and obviously that affected, right? So there are 6 generic questions that we have uncovered, created, a little of both. And we are playing around with creating some sort of a worksheet or a document that you can use so that when you are approaching material, you are able to maybe fill it out, right? Something like that, like an aid to help students better comprehend. This isn't for just one subject. As we said, this is generic. You can use this for pretty much anything you need to learn. So starting with the first area, or the first question is, can you explain? Now, unfortunately, some people stop at explaining because they find that if you can explain it to the wind or to the wall or to yourself, that is good enough. And that's not the case, right? We'll talk about why we want you to explain to other people in a moment. We're also going to touch on the different perspectives on this subject. So what are they and why do they think that way? All right. It's not just know what you know, but it's also know what other people claim to know on the subject, and more so why they disagree with your point of view. Right? This isn't debate class. This isn't anything to do with law or anything like that, but it is helpful to understand another person's point of view and why they oppose what you are reading, the author, anything like that. Okay, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about your self-knowledge and how we want you to tie everything back to function and purpose. Next is empathy. What is that saying? It's people forget what you said, but they never forget how they made you feel, or they never forget how you made them feel. I'm sorry. And we want to tap into our emotions, right? Emotions are powerful. So how can we empathize with the material if we're reading about something that we could care less about? We'll get there in a moment. Next, we will talk about practical application. This is really important if you are not loving the material. This is a special one for you. If you're thinking, when am I ever going to need this? I'm never going to need this. This is pointless, right? We'll talk about that. And then our final point is interpretation by others. How has this been interpreted by others? So with that, these are the 6 questions. I like to call them the 6 dimensions to better understand something. Again, if you want to write them down. If not, I can also just share the slides with you afterwards. So if you want to share, actually, I'll drop in the chat right now my email. So if you would like a copy of the slides, I can make those available to you. All right, so let us move on here. I just want to make sure that everything is nice, good. We don't have any questions in the chat. Tremendous. All right, let's keep on going here. So next thing we are going to discuss, we're going to break down a subject that most of us probably are aware of. We probably think we know it really well. And so we're going to test it out. We're going to test it out. But before we go there, we want to see what your current comprehension skills look like. Those tools that we developed when we were in 3rd grade, we want to see how sharp they are now. So we're going to read something together. You can read it off of my screen if you'd like. You can also go to irisreading.com/comp, and we're looking for the article called focusrituals.pdf. Okay, so this is the article we're going to read. We're going to read for 2 minutes, and then I just want to see with what you have on hand right now, whatever your comprehension strategies are they working, right? So I'll ask you to give me a percentage of what you understood from this article, and I will disable my webcam. Here we go, everyone. We're just going to read for 2 minutes. Ready, set, go. All right, so we read for 2 minutes. Now, give me an assessment of your comprehension, okay? Give me a percentage of your comprehension. Would you say that you understood 80% of what we read, 90% of what we read? Now, we bring this up because we are not the biggest fans of reading comprehension exams. We would like to change that only because there are certain inconsistencies we have found with the testing process. Obviously, we have all taken these comprehension exams, these standardized exams, and so one of the problems we found is that they're not necessarily the best way to gauge your comprehension. If you are taking a reading comprehension exam, keep in mind that it's timed, so that's already something that goes against you, right? And what we're not considering, if there's an individual, and this has happened many times as we've taught these workshops, where we've run into students who run out of time, they score a 19 out of 38 on the exam. They were only able to answer 19 of the 38 questions, which means that they got a 50%, which is a nice big F, right? But what we don't agree with is that if the individual had read and answered correctly these 19 questions, so 19 of the 38 were correct, is a 50% still an accurate assessment of his comprehension or of his reading skills? We don't find that to be the case. Unfortunately, we can't necessarily change it. We're trying, but it doesn't look like we're going to be able to. The only thing we can do, however, is improve your comprehension skills, help you read faster, help you get through those exams faster. Okay, so again, if you'd like to share your comprehension percentage with me, you're more than welcome to. You don't have to. Now let's get into that subject. We said we're going to tear apart a subject that most of us probably think we know fairly well, and we're going to see if after applying these 6 questions to this one subject, our comprehension on it is as good as we initially thought. All right, and the subject at play today is gravity. So most of us think, okay, well, what goes up must come down. That's a given. Everybody in the universe knows that. Okay, so would you say then that your comprehension on the subject is good, is fair? And if you say yes, then I ask you to then please explain to me this theory of relativity and how it works in conjunction with gravity, or how quantum physics ties in to gravity, or even how distance ties in to gravity. The coffee has not kicked in this morning. How does distance tie into gravity? Okay, so now we may be thinking, well, wait a minute, I don't know. Well, these are all questions that apply with gravity, right? So can we still say that we understand the subject fairly well? All right, maybe not. So let's get into the first subject, or the first question that we want you to use when you are assessing your comprehension, the first check. And that is to be able to explain something. Now, most people, unfortunately, will stop trying to learn something as soon as they see that they are able to explain it. But there are a few things that we want to keep in mind with this. For one, we don't want you to explain it to the wind, right? We want you to explain it to people, and preferably people who don't know anything about the subject. Why? Because we want them to ask you questions such as why, right? Why does the apple fall from the tree? Why won't my phone float up to space when I drop it? Why? And answering, well, that's just gravity, that is not a good enough explanation. It's not an explanation, actually. It doesn't answer the question. Saying that something is just because it is, that doesn't really prove that we know what we're talking about, right? And if we can't explain it again, we're going to be winging it when we take the exam. So we want to explain, and we want to use, we have a couple tools that we have found that can help you when looking to explain. For example, Reddit has this thread called ELI5, okay? And that stands for Explain Like I'm 5. So if you have something that is, you feel very dense, very complex, you don't think that anybody's going to be able to explain it to you, or you don't know how to explain it to someone else, you don't know how to simplify it, check out ELI5. It's very helpful. We found a lot of like nursing processes, right? Medical processes that are fairly difficult to understand and let alone memorize. We found them on Reddit, and they have been simplified to the just beautifully, right? And so instead of banging your head against the computer trying to figure out how to simplify something, you can check ELI5. Also, let's see, Chat GTP, although it has many students have, you know, some have abused Chat GPT and used it to their advantage, whether that be writing a paper and then claiming they wrote it or things like that. We are using ChatGPT as a study guide, or as a study buddy, I'm sorry. And so I just typed in explain in the simplest terms gravity, and I did that. Okay, ChatGPT is a great thing to have on hand. I have it on my phone actually when I am looking to create these types of presentations. Our next one will be on vitamin D, so just something to keep in mind for next week. Our goal is to teach these workshops with a different subject every week, and we've been on a vitamin D kick only because we only get 60 days of sun in Chicago. So we're gonna do vitamin D next week. So stay tuned if you are interested. But again, ChatGPT is really tremendous for this, and I highly recommend it if you don't have anybody that you feel you can go to help you explain something. Okay, also we want you to keep in mind Feynman's technique, or Feynman's method of taking notes. One of the steps in Feynman's method is to explain something in complex terms, but then in simple terms. And this is important because sometimes we may, without really wanting to, we may just regurgitate what we read off the page. And if we're able to verbalize it, then we think that we understood it very well and we're good. And that doesn't mean that we understand it, right? So we want to make sure we can explain it maybe to a 5-year-old, right? Maybe to your parents if they speak a different language. All right, so keep that in mind. Explaining is not just explaining to the wind. It is explaining, sorry, I just dropped my phone. It is explaining to a variety of different people. And it's also good, wow, it really got under my chair. It's also helpful if you speak another language and you maybe want to try to explain it in another language. That's helpful too. So we want to be creative about how we go about explaining something, okay? Now I'm going to pause right here. Again, I just want to make sure that nobody has dropped any questions in the chat. Let's see, nothing, we are good. All right, let's keep going. Next question we're going to get into are the different perspectives, okay? The different perspectives on a subject. Now, this presentation actually got started during COVID. There was a lot of controversy on the internet about many different subjects. And so we had a lot of time to actually research the different perspectives of gravity, right? Because remember, we're keeping the theme of gravity in this presentation. So we were thinking, could there be different perspectives? Are there naysayers of gravity? And there are. The Anti-Gravity Alliance, the AGA, they claim on their website, and this is just a screenshot of their website, that gravity is a lie. They say, if gravity exists, then how do birds, bats, and insects fly? How do airplanes fly? Why do balloons float up? Okay. Now, these are good questions only because if we are looking to beef up our explanation, what we just talked about earlier, then we should be able to answer those questions. And if we can't, then we need to pause, right? And we need to research the answer to this. So you might also think, well, this might just be one organization, one person. No, there are more. There are many more, actually, that support the AGA, or the Anti-Gravity Alliance. And I was surprised because the fourth one down is the Scientology website. So that was something I didn't know. I had no idea that they supported this point of view on gravity. I am not here to say yay or nay, but I am here to say, you know, it's good to understand why these individuals feel this way or think this way. Okay, the only reason Scientology came up was because of a recent documentary that I watched, and I was like, oh, I had no idea. But there are others here as well. Let's just keep going here. So we have the National Center for Science Education. They have written that gravity is only a theory, okay? And so we want to pause here because you may be thinking, what's wrong with that? Why do we consider that a different point of view? Well, because most of us probably thought that gravity was fact, because it is fact that if you drop something, it will fall, it will hit the ground. So that is a fact, right? Undeniable fact. But why is the National Center for Science Education only calling it a theory? Because a fact and a theory, those are two different words, obviously, right? So something to think about. We also have individuals that submit dissertation, right? Physics dissertation on the subject of gravity, and they claim that gravity is a myth. And there is even an astrophysicist by the name of Dr. Brian Keating who does not believe in gravity. Okay, so we now have all of these perspectives, all of these people who claim that gravity is not real. Now, what do you think about gravity? Are we maybe just a little bit like, right, just a little bit? Now, all of those points that were brought out, if you can't defend your stance against theirs, then maybe that means that we don't know as much about it as we thought we did, right? And again, the goal of this is not to confuse you, but more so to deepen your comprehension. So if you don't feel confident with your explanation that we just talked about earlier, the first step, then maybe we need to do a little more reading, a little more digging to beefing up, right, that explanation of comprehension. And again, that explanation of gravity, and to make sure that we actually are comprehending correctly. Okay, so those are the different perspectives. This is the second question. Now notice we have asked a lot of questions and we're not going to answer them in relation to gravity, not because we can't, but because we want you to research the subject, right? We want to pique your interest by means of questions. And again, we don't always know what questions we should be asking, which is why we came up with this presentation. Now let's move on to the third area, the third question that we should be asking, and that is of self-knowledge. And so despite what people say, it actually is all about you, especially when we're talking about reading and learning, seeing that you have to take the exam. So yes, it's all about you. We definitely promote selfishness when we're talking about learning, right? So look for function and purpose. How does this affect you? Whatever subject it is you are learning, right? Something simple, again, with the theme of gravity. If we use eye drops, we know those eye drops are going to fall right around our eye, maybe not in our eye if we have bad aim, but they're going to fall around our eyeballs. Okay, so you know, that's something to keep in mind. It's a simple way of applying function and purpose, but again, we just want to think about it. And this is just one scenario. There are probably other things you do on a daily basis that can prove this function and purpose, right? So think about that self-knowledge. Think about how it ties back to you, because it's very, very important. We don't want to have the idea of, well, it applies over there, but not over here. That's not always the case, okay? Now, moving on to our next question, can you empathize? Can you empathize with the subject? Now, how do we empathize with gravity? Remember what we said about feelings and how those can stay with you for a very, 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 very long time. So how do we empathize with gravity? Well, maybe we can think about individuals who have to go through things with less of a gravitational pull than we have here on Earth. So astronauts are a wonderful example of that, right? Up in space, they maybe they can't do with ease many of the things that we do down here on Earth. Like, for example, have you thought about what it's like to maybe take a shower up in space? How do showers work, right? I feel like they would be rather chaotic. And with some research, some digging, we found a TikTok of an astronaut who shared. Now, if you're interested, the account is Lord of the Stars, which I found adorable only because it reminded me of the Star-Lord from the Avengers. But anyway, Lord of the Stars. And this astronaut is going to share with us how she washes her hair. I don't think that you'll be able to hear the audio, but I will just share what she says. You'll see the subtitles on there, but I'll share as well. So here we go.
Let's see. To get started, these are the things I need. A bag of warm water, a little no-rinse shampoo,
warm water, no-rinse shampoo,
towel,
a towel for comb.
What I like to do is start by just putting some hot water, squirting it onto my scalp.
She squirts warm water on the scalp.
And I have a mirror here so I can kind of watch what I'm doing.
She's got a mirror that's velcroed to the wall.
Sometimes the water gets away from you.
Oh my gosh.
And you try and catch as much as you can.
She catches it.
And I just work the water up through to the end of my hair.
She works the water to the ends of her hair.
And I take my no-rinse shampoo.
She takes no-rinse
and squirt it also on the scalp, just a little bit.
On the scalp.
And rub it in. Again, kind of working it up to the ends.
To the ends.
Sometimes I'll actually take my comb, help work it all the way to the
She
end.
combs it all the way through.
And I like to take my towel while I have the shampoo in there and just kind of work it.
She uses
Because
the towel to
without
rub
standing
it
under
into her
running
scalp.
water, you kind of need to use the towel a little bit to help get some of the dirt out.
And then helps get the dirt out.
I like to follow that by a little more water.
She adds a little more
It's called no rinse shampoo, but I think it's best to use a little water with it.
She finds it works best with a little water, even though it's no rinse.
It actually feels kind of squeaky clean right now.
She said it feels squeaky clean.
Now I'll take the dry part of my towel. We use towels for quite a while here, since we have limited supplies.
Just dries
We use them wisely.
her scalp.
I think that's pretty good. And now as my hair dries, as the water evaporates from my hair, it will become humidity in the air, and then our air conditioning system will collect that
So
in
the
the
air
condensate, and
will
it
air
won't be long,
dry,
and our water
it'll
processing system
evaporate,
will turn that into drinking water.
and then it'll end up in the water cleaning system on the ship, and they'll drink that water. So I'm just, every time I watch this, I'm like, what is the process like for someone that has thick, long, curly hair like me? I mean, I was like, that even looks challenging with her hair. I'm just like, it definitely taps into my emotions. But the thing is, now maybe can we empathize with astronauts just a little bit more? What are some other things that we do down here on Earth that they probably can't do with ease up in space? Well, okay, we thought about the shower already. You thought about using the bathroom up in space. That's a question. We found some information on special toilets and special training because things float up there, right? So what happens? That's something to keep in mind. Also, have you ever wondered what happens when you burp up in space? And so while I won't give you that answer, I will tell you that a part of the research, the words chunky bubbles were in the description. It was something about the gases in your intestines and how it's not a very happy reaction. So with that, now can we maybe empathize with astronauts just a little bit more? Keep in mind, yes, this was maybe a silly approach, but we're still learning about gravity. We're still learning about how it affects individuals up in space, right? So we're still on topic, just on the outer rim, right? Now let's move on to our next question, which is of practical application. And this is a big one because most of the time, maybe sometimes we may feel like this is pointless, right? Like a specific subject, algebra, geometry, those were my enemies in school, in high school. And I always thought, when am I ever going to need this in the future, right? Little did I know that I would run into it a couple years later in nursing school. But anyway, we want to think about practical application as we're learning, okay? How is this applied to the larger world? It's not just we're never going to need this. We want to think about that. Okay, so if we throw a ball, again in harmony with the theme of gravity, we know it's going to hit the ground. That's a simple way of applying, right, gravity and what we've been discussing. But maybe it's not as easy with other subjects, right? Maybe it's not as clear as just 1, 2, 3. So we need to think about these specific scenarios and how we can apply what it is we are trying to learn. Now, that was our 5th dimension. We're going to hit on our final dimension, which is the interpretation by others. So what does this mean? Well, there are a few ways we can go about this. For one, we can go the route of artistic representation, dance, music, right? We know things are interpreted by those means. We can also go the route of language translation or interpretation as well, because we know things are they can sometimes be lost in translation. If you speak one language and then you interpret it to another language, it doesn't always sound the same, right? Especially if you're a native speaker of both or even more. you know that things will lose their meaning. So if you have access to the material in a different language, that's something that maybe would be helpful. But for today's presentation, we are going with artistic representation, and we are going the route of gravity-defying sculptures. Okay, we found a whole line of gravity-defying sculptures, and they're beautiful, but they kind of play this trick on your mind where you're like, that shouldn't stay upright. That doesn't make sense. All right. This is called The Force of Nature by Lorenzo Quinn. And again, if we have, right, we've been talking about gravity this whole time, and we're like, that shouldn't stay upright. It doesn't make sense, right? Another one, this is in the Fontainebleau in Paris. I don't think I would even want to see that, only because I'm so scared that that thing would topple over, right? So that is in that Fontainebleau in Paris. Then we have the floating rocks in Cairo. I'm inclined to believe that there are some sort of magnets that are helping this stand up, because I don't, like, no amount of glue can keep two boulders upright like that. I doubt it, right? So we actually had someone join our presentation a couple of weeks ago who helped with the installation of these sculptures in Cairo. So that was fun. We also found these book sculptures in Madrid. And yeah, it's just interesting to see, again, because we know what goes up goes down. It has to fall down. So how are these sculptures staying upright? We don't understand, right? And so that will be some unofficial homework, trying to figure out how they became, or how these sculptures are gravity-defying sculptures, right? These are artistic representations on that. So let's do a quick rundown of all of the dimensions we have talked about, all of the questions we've talked about, to deepen our comprehension on a subject. Now, if you'd like a worksheet, again, breaking down the questions, you're more than welcome to send me an email. And again, that's cynthia@irisreading.com. So first, explain it. Can you explain it to whoever? A 5-year-old, your parents, right? Anything like that. We want to explain. Okay. We want to think about the different perspectives. Who doesn't like this subject, and why don't they like it? Okay. We're not trying to convert anybody, but it's helpful to see, right? It's helpful to see because we want to sharpen our defense. What is your self-knowledge, right? What is your self-knowledge on the subject? How does this apply, right? How can we find function and purpose with what we're learning? What does this all mean? Can you empathize, okay? Can you empathize with the subject, or with individuals that maybe discovered the subject, wrote about the subject, people that became experts in the field? Why? What led them here? What made them experts? What in their life affected them so much to pursue a career in said field, to become an author in said field? Okay. How can this be applied practically, especially when we hate the subject? And that's okay. It is totally okay to not like the subject, but it is not okay to just not like it and not do anything about it. We want to figure out how we can use this. Really think about it. And if you can't think about it, then you need to pause and really research why, because there has to be some form of application on here, okay? And it's important for us. And then the artist's representation as well. Okay, so we talked about the gravity-defying sculptures. There are other ways to come about interpreting the information, okay? So we want you to inspect before you read. That is another way to boost your comprehension on a specific subject. When we are inspecting, these are all of the things we want you to look for. Again, this helps just with, it's like an appetizer before you eat. You kind of get a feel for the restaurant, right? Same here. If you read through the intro, the headings and subheadings, the words in bold and/or italics, the titles of charts, tables, and diagrams, the conclusion, as well as any questions that were published in the piece, if you look at all of this, your comprehension is starting out nice and sharp, right? Even before you've actually gotten into the meat of the article. We're going to try this out right now. We'll inspect something together. So this is something we'd like you to practice on your own when reading, before you read. We've got the subject, right? We've got the title, it's going with the flow. And then we have an introductory quote here. I'll read it. It says, "Life is a series of natural and spontaneous changes. Don't resist them. That only creates sorrow. Let reality be reality. Let things flow naturally in whatever way they like," by Lao Tzu. Let's go through the headings. Number 1, realize that you can't control everything. Number 2, become aware. Number 3, breathe. Number 4, get perspective. 5, practice. 6, laugh. And 7, realize that you can't control others. Ugh. All right. And the last thing we wanted to highlight is that sentence at the bottom. It says, "This passage is selected from the book Focus, a Simplicity Manifesto in the Age of Distraction" by Leo Babauta. So again, if you'd like access to that book, I can send it to you. It is a free publication that we can make available to you. The author has given us permission to share this. So if you'd like, just let me know. So now we're going to finish reading the article. We have a nice idea of what to expect. Now let's finish reading it. Okay, then I'll give you up to 2 minutes. This is not a race. Just read as much as you can. Okay, here we go. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. All right, so we finished reading the article. What do you think about the inspecting before you actually read? Do you feel like it helps boost your comprehension? Now give us a comprehension percentage. So did you feel like you maybe understood a little bit more the second time after inspecting? Or do you feel like you understood a little bit more the first time without inspecting? Okay. If you made an improvement, that is great. If not, that just means we have to continue to practice. This is the first time that probably many of us are even practicing something like this, right? We only learn how to read one time, and then you're kind of left on your own for the rest of your life, and that's rough, right? So again, we just have to continue to practice. Again, also practicing comprehension. It's not just read and understand something automatically. Some of us need additional tools to help us boost that comprehension. Now remember, inspecting can help get the gist of what to expect first. Okay, so again, we said it's like the appetizer before you actually eat at the restaurant, like the main entree. We want to quickly share the IRIS method with you all. So we are IRIS Reading. We do have a company, we do have an acronym after our company name. So the I is for inspecting. We talked about that. We didn't, however, say that after you inspect, you can then decide if this is something you want to read or not. Okay, so keep that in mind. If maybe you have a teacher that sends over loads of work, loads of material, and you read through all of it, and then you find that you don't actually have to read any of this, right? So we want you to inspect beforehand and then decide if you should read it or not. Then we want you to ask questions, all the questions, every single question, okay? And we talked about 6 questions specifically that hopefully you find helpful in the future. And then we want you to move to the final step, which is store or memorize this information, okay? Or even take notes. How are we writing it down after we actually understand it? All right, we don't want you to write things down that you don't understand. That would be shooting ourselves in the foot. So again, strategy is very important, and we want to make sure that's also something to keep in mind. All of our workshops, we want you to work smarter and not harder. Okay, so we don't want you to suffer through reading and learning. We have tools on hand that you can use. Now, if you'd like a copy of the book that we reference for today's session, you can send me an email and I can get that to you. Also, if you'd like the slides or anything like that, my email is cynthia@irisreading.com. I also, again, just emphasizing our social media. So if you did enjoy the content for today, please check out our social media, whether that be on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or just liking and subscribing to our channel. We would really, really appreciate it. Again, don't forget to leave your comments, your questions, your concerns under the video or next to it. And with that, we hope to see you in a future workshop, everyone. Thank you for stopping by, and don't forget to check out the irisreading.com website. See ya.